You ease into this story the way someone eases into a warm bath that absolutely does not exist yet in the era you're about to walk into. The world around you settles into a gentle hush, and you feel yourself drifting into a time long before soap had a proper place on any shelf, long before scented bars, lavender suds, or anything resembling those fancy modern body washes that promise mountain breeze, but mostly smell like ambition. Here, the breeze is real, and it carries the quiet musk of wood smoke, earth, and people simply doing their best. You take a slow breath. The air is cool, almost crisp, the kind that clears your mind while softening your shoulders. In the distance, a village stirs just beyond the fading grey of early dawn. Chickens give half-hearted clucks, the dog yips once, and somewhere someone is already grinding grain because apparently mornings were not designed for sleeping in. A thin ribbon of smoke rises from a thatched roof, curling gently like it has nowhere better to be. This is the world you're stepping into. A world where staying clean is less a daily habit and more a cosmic negotiation. And honestly, you probably won't make it through this day smelling the way you hope. Still, before we go farther, let's do the small rituals. If you enjoy these sleepy journeys, gently tap the like button. It helps keep the candles lit around here. If you want more nights like this, lightly subscribe. It's free and very medieval budget friendly. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all drifting through history together from different corners of the night. Now take one more slow breath and let's ease into tonight's journey. You open your eyes again inside a small medieval cottage, just as the sun finally decides to participate in its job. Wooden beams overhead, uneven and darkened with age, creak lightly. You can hear the faint trickle of water outside, though calling it clean is optimistic at best. A clay pitcher sits beside a shallow wooden basin, your entire hygiene toolkit for the morning. A single splash of cold water on the face is about as luxurious as it gets, unless you count praying for rain as an advanced cleansing ritual. Here's your first historical fact of the night. Before true soap became widespread in Europe, people often relied on water alone, or sometimes sand, ashes, or rough cloth to scrub themselves. Yes, exfoliation existed. It was just a bit enthusiastic. You dip your fingers into the basin. The water bites at your skin like it resents being disturbed. As you pat your face, a thin chill spreads across your cheeks. Your reflection in the water wobbles. Unimpressed. You do your best. The medieval standard is low, but spirits remain polite. Across the room, hanging by the door, is a bundle of dried herbs, sage, rosemary, and something else that smells faintly like hope. People often use such bundles to mask scents or fumigate spaces. That's your obscure tidbit. Some households burned herbs not for romance or ritual, but because they honestly believed the smoke itself could purify the air and the body. Whether it worked, well, that's complicated. Historians still debate whether these herb-burning habits were rooted more in practical deodorizing or superstition about bad air carrying illness. It's probably a mix of both, but today, it simply adds a soft glow of fragrance as morning light slowly warms the cottage walls. You step outside. Dew clings to the grass like tiny glass beads. A narrow path weaves between homes, each with its own morning noises, clattering pails, crackling hearths, a sleepy argument between neighbors that seems too early to be this passionate about firewood. The village itself feels half awake, like someone gently nudging it toward consciousness. Your clothes, simple wool and linen, don't exactly scream fresh, but they hold the warmth of the morning sun as it rises. You adjust the collar and immediately understand why historical laundry day was one of the most feared events of the week. Cold water plus heavy fabric is a combination only masochists and medieval peasants could love. As you walk, the scent of the countryside presses close sweet hay, damp soil, and that familiar shared humanity that existed long before deodorant. No one judges it, no one escapes it. Even the nobleman strolling past you carries the faint aroma of horse and oak smoke. Status can fix many things, but not that. And as you follow the dirt road out of the village, the world begins to broaden. Fields stretch out, soft and gold. A small river glitters nearby, whispering as it slips between smooth stones. That river, by the way, is so important that everyone in the village treats it like a beloved but slightly chaotic cousin. They wash things in it, but not themselves, not often anyway. Bathing in rivers is reserved for summer bravery or moments of existential crisis. You pause at the water's edge. The surface glimmers with the early sun, bending the light into ribbons. The smell of wet earth and moss gathers around you like a soft blanket. For a moment, it feels peaceful, almost modern, until you remember that upstream someone is currently rinsing wool and offering absolutely no apologies. Still, the river's coolness invites you closer. You lean down, scoop a small handful, and dab your wrists. It's refreshing, grounding, and slightly gritty in a way that suggests the village's laundry calendar has been active. But it wakes you up, gently. The world around you brightens. Birds chatter, a cart creaks past, and you feel your senses stretching comfortably into this old world where people did their best to stay clean without the things we take for granted, and where freshness meant something very different. And so your day begins. Slowly, simply, and with the faint scent of rosemary smoke trailing behind you. You follow the curve of the river a little farther, letting the morning settle into your bones. The light slips across the surface like a lazy silver ribbon, and the air around you brightens with the kind of gentle warmth that makes you forget just briefly that soap, as you know it, is still centuries away from becoming a household hero. Instead, this world leans heavily on the elements: water, earth, fire, air, and a good deal of wishful thinking. You crouch near the riverbank again, brushing your hand along the smooth stones. Some are worn nearly round, shaped by years of currents whispering over them. People use stones like these for scrubbing, yes, literal stone scrubbing, though mostly for clothes. In tougher moments, though, some folks use them on their skin, especially when the grime gets particularly stubborn. Think of it as the medieval version of a spa exfoliation treatment, except without the spa, the relaxation, the candles, or the choices. The stones are free, so the stones win. As you stand, a young girl approaches with a wooden pail swinging from her hand. She gives you a polite nod, the kind that says, "Yes, stranger, I see you using the river for mysterious reasons, but that's fine. It's early." She dips her pail into the water and looks up at you. "Don't drink from downstream," she says matter-of-factly, then trudges off, leaving you to contemplate your life choices. Or at least, your hydration choices. There's truth in her advice. Water here is rarely just water. This brings us to your historical fact of the moment. In many medieval communities, natural water sources were shared for everything. Laundry, rinsing tools, washing vegetables, soaking leather, cooling hot iron, dealing with fish, and occasionally bathing. The idea of separate zones for different tasks? Not quite a thing yet. You're lucky to be standing on a relatively quiet stretch of river where the worst upstream offender seems to be a soggy pair of woolen trousers drifting lazily toward their fate. You step back from the bank and begin a slow walk toward the village fields. The path between the cottages and the farmland is packed tight from years of footsteps and cartwheels. The earth is cool and firm beneath your shoes, and the soft breeze brings the scent of distant cooking fires. It's too early for stew. Someone is probably just trying to coax damp wood into cooperation. As you walk, you pass a woman beating a rug draped over a fence. Dust explodes from it in a dramatic cloud that could blot out the sun if it felt ambitious enough. She smiles politely as the dust drifts your way, because in this era, weaponized dirt is just part of the charm. You return a stoic nod, embracing the inevitable. Just beyond her home, a pair of elderly men sit on stools outside a small workshop. They're working with long strips of cloth that look suspiciously too white for their surroundings. One dips his cloth into a wooden tub filled with what smells like, well, not flowers. This is your obscure tidbit of the day. Before soap was common, people often used stale urine to whiten cloth and remove stains. Yes, urine. It contains ammonia, which is actually effective and aromatic. You observe from a safe distance, resisting the urge to make eye contact with the tub. The men chat casually, unfazed, laughing about something involving a goat and a bucket, and you decide that perhaps ignorance is the cleanest option of all. Walking farther along the road, you catch the sound of sheep bleating from a fenced field. Their wool is thick, tangled, and slightly chaotic, very much like your hair would be if this world had its way for long. Shepherds rely heavily on wool oil lanolin to protect and condition their skin. It's a natural byproduct of handling sheep, and while it's technically moisturizing, it also leaves you smelling like someone who naps inside a fleece-lined bucket. You think about how people here must mix and match whatever nature hands them: herbs, ashes, rough cloth, animal fats, clay, and sometimes river sand. Squeaky clean is not a phrase that exists, but clean enough is a moral victory. Historians still debate whether medieval people truly bathed less than we imagine, or simply bathed differently, using water in smaller amounts more frequently. Some argue that many peasants washed their hands and faces daily, while others claim these routines were more sporadic. As usual, reality lives somewhere in the comfortable grey area between them. But today, as you stand here, you can sense that cleanliness isn't neglected, it's just improvised. You come upon a small footbridge now, arched gently over the narrower stretch of the river. A cluster of villagers gather here to wash produce. Carrots with hair-like roots dangle into the water. A woman scrubs potatoes with the kind of intensity normally reserved for polishing silver. A teenager rinses a handful of apples, checking each one as though it personally insulted her. The river is a lifeline, a multi-purpose tool, a gossip center, and occasionally a victim. A heavy-set man notices your travel-worn clothes and beckons you over. He raises an eyebrow and asks, "You washed this morning?" You admit to splashing your face. He squints, watches you a moment, then nods approvingly. "Good enough," he declares, returning to his carrot. You smile and move on. That's something. At least your first hygiene review of the day. The fields spread out ahead of you in shades of green and gold. Workers are already bending over rows of plants, tending soil, pulling weeds, muttering things under their breath that probably sound better after lunch. You stroll past them, listening to the chorus of tools tapping the earth in rhythm. Birds dart overhead. A pair of crows sit on a scarecrow's shoulders, providing emotional support rather than fear. A woman wiping sweat from her brow glances at you and laughs softly. "If you're going to be out in this heat," she says, "don't forget to rub some ashes on your hands later. Helps with the grime." She gestures to a small clay pot beside her. Sure enough, inside is a mixture of cold ash and water, forming a grey, paste-like substance. It's gritty, slightly alkaline, and surprisingly effective at cutting grease. Primitive soap. In a way, soap without the glory. You try a tiny bit on your fingertips. It feels like rubbing salt made of disappointment onto your skin, but it does remove dirt. The sun climbs higher. The warmth presses gently against your back, and the faintest hint of sweat collects at your temples. You wipe it away, feeling oddly proud of your medieval adaptability. Or maybe you're just delusional from the ash paste. Hard to say. The road unfolds before you again. The village is behind you now, the field stretching forward, the river curving beside you like a friendly escort. The world is simple, practical, and easy in its own way, even if the concept of hygiene is held together with determination and herb smoke. You take a deep breath and keep walking, your senses softening into the rhythm of the day. The path begins to slope upward, just gently enough that you feel it in your calves. The air thins a little, not in a dramatic mountain climbing way, but in the subtle, peaceful way that makes each breath a little cooler. You trail your fingers along tall, waving grass as you walk. Dew still clings to the tips, making your hands sparkle faintly in the morning sun like you just performed an extremely low-budget magic trick. Ahead, perched on a small rise, stands a wooden bathhouse, or rather, what passes for a bathhouse in this era. It's small, roughly built, with smoke whispering from a vented roof. Bathhouses like this are rare in rural villages, but when they exist, they are beloved. Not quite a spa, not quite a medical facility, just a slightly steamy wooden box full of hope. You push open the creaky door. Warm air sighs across your face, thick with humidity and the faint scent of heated stones. A few villagers sit on benches, some wrapped in cloths, others simply letting the steam envelop them. Their expressions range from blissful to contemplative to, "I've been sweating here for so long, I've entered another dimension." This brings us to your historical fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, communal steam baths existed long before soap became widespread. Inspired by older Roman and Scandinavian traditions, these spaces offered warmth, shared labor, and a chance to scrub with whatever materials were available, often rough cloth, sand, or bundles of leafy branches. The bathhouse keeper, an older man with a beard as impressive as a small sheepskin, nods at you and gestures toward a stool. "Sit," he says. "Let the steam soften you." You obey because resisting someone with that much beard authority feels unwise. The heat seeps into your muscles slowly, like a patient cat settling into your lap. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the tension drift away. Someone on the other side of the room hums quietly an old tune, familiar enough that you can almost guess the next note. The wooden walls creak like they're enjoying the warmth too. Sweat forms along your arms and brow. It feels oddly refreshing, like your body is purging a week's worth of medieval dust, even though it's only been a couple of hours. You think, for a moment, that maybe this world isn't so unhygienic after all. Then a man enters carrying a bucket, sloshing with what appears to be cold river water. He dumps it over his head with a gasp so dramatic it echoes. You involuntarily shiver in sympathy. Another man follows suit. Clearly, contrast therapy is alive and well. One woman offers you a bundle of birch branches. "Hit yourself with this," she says cheerfully. You blink. She demonstrates by, playfully slapping her arms and back with her bundle. "Helps the blood move," she explains. And surprisingly, she's right. That's your obscure tidbit. The tradition of striking oneself with leafy switches called venic, in some regions, was not only for stimulation, but also for fragrance. The oils released from the leaves created a natural, pleasant aroma, masking less pleasant medieval realities. You try a gentle tap-tap with your own bundle. It doesn't hurt. It feels like being lightly disciplined by a very polite tree. Steam curls around your face. The warmth makes your thoughts drift like floating embers. Someone cracks a joke about how, if the bathhouse were any hotter, the chickens would start laying hard-boiled eggs. The room erupts in a ripple of tired laughter. You add a small chuckle of your own because humor, like hygiene, survives in every era even if it smells different. Historians still debate whether communal bathing was more a social gathering or a health practice. Some argue that it fostered community bonding, gossip exchanges, and casual matchmaking, while others suggest it simply provided warmth in cold climates. Both explanations seem true as you watch villagers chatting, comparing aches, and occasionally arguing passionately about whose turn it is to fetch more water. The bathhouse keeper hands you a rough cloth dipped in warm water mixed with ashes. "Scrub," he instructs. You do. The cloth feels coarse, but strangely satisfying, like it's removing layers of travel, fatigue, and possibly your remaining 21st century expectations. As you scrub your arms, a woman beside you sighs dreamily. "Nothing beats a good steam," she says. "Makes you feel new." Her hair is damp, her skin flushed, and for a moment you believe her. The simplicity of it, the heat, the water, the company feels deeply human. After what feels like half an hour, you step outside. Cool air rushes against your skin, sending a shiver through you. But it's the good kind, the kind that makes you feel alive, refreshed, almost clean. The village stretches below, framed by fields and meadows. The river glitters like a living thread, weaving the land together. You inhale deeply. The scent of wet earth rises around you, mingling with the lingering warmth of the steam clinging to your skin. You start down the slope, your steps light, your mind floating somewhere between past and present. You're not spotless, but you're softer around the edges, which is all this world asks for. You walk on, following the path as it bends back toward the heart of medieval life. You reach the bottom of the slope with the faintest trace of steam still clinging to your skin, drifting away like a shy ghost. The air down here feels fresher, lighter, and dare you say cleaner, though that might simply be the lingering optimism that bathhouses tend to sprinkle into people like medieval fairy dust. Your footsteps pad softly along a dirt path as you wander back toward the cluster of cottages. Everything smells slightly different now. Wood smoke, wet grass, and the faint herbal warmth that seems to cling to anyone who's spent time in a bathhouse. A pair of children run past you, shrieking with the joy of having absolutely no responsibilities yet. One of them is holding a stick. The other is holding the same stick, which explains the screaming. Their feet kick up tiny puffs of dust. and you catch a glimpse of a woman nearby, rinsing her hands in a small wooden bowl filled with cloudy water. She pours a pinch of something into it, crushed herbs, by the smell of it, and rubs her hands together with the seriousness of someone preparing a ritual. Your historical fact arrives right here. Before soap was widespread, many medieval people used simple herbal infusions, mint, marjoram, thyme, lavender, mixed with warm water as a kind of cleansing rinse. Not quite soap, not quite perfume, but enough to leave the hands smelling faintly, like a salad with self-esteem. The woman catches you watching and smiles. Helps keep the bad air away, she says, lifting her fragrant fingers, especially on market days. She wrinkles her nose, suggesting that market days have a reputation for aromas best described as memorable rather than pleasant. You walk on, passing a row of small gardens bordered by crooked fences. The plants push upward eagerly, cabbage, leeks, carrots that look slightly embarrassed by their shape. You notice several households drying laundry, on lines made of twisted fiber rope. The linens flap in the breeze like medieval flags declaring, "We tried." This brings you to an odd little detail, your obscure tidbit of this section. Some households rubbed clay or even finely crushed chalk into their linens before rinsing. It helped whiten the fabric and gave it a smooth, powdery feel. Imagine doing laundry with a combination of dirt and hope, and you're halfway there. As you continue, you see a man hauling a wooden bucket toward a small communal fire pit. He empties the bucket, and out spills a slosh of muddy grey water filled with ashes. Another villager stirs the pits, spreading the ashes out as if this is all very normal. Which, to be fair, it is. Their leaching lye. The man wipes his hands on his tunic and says, "We'll have good lye in a few days. Strong enough to make soap, if the gods are kind." Ah, yes, soap does exist here, but not the store-bought, lemon-scented dream, you know. Making medieval soap requires ashes, grease, patience, questionable aromas, and perhaps divine intervention. Historians still debate whether most households made their own soap or relied on specialists, he says, as if narrating your thoughts. Personally, I think it stinks too much to be doing it near my house. You nod politely and decide not to ask follow-up questions for the sake of your remaining appetite. The path leads you toward a larger square, where more villagers gather. Someone is selling onions. Someone else is desperately trying to sell something that looks like a turnip, but may in fact be a weapon. Nearby, a man stands beside a wooden tub, filled with what appears to be a mixture of warm water and crushed bay leaves. He invites passers-by to dip their hands in it. For cleansing, he says. For blessings. For both. Depends who you ask. You dip your fingers just to be polite. The water is warm and smells pleasant, and your hands come out feeling slightly less medieval, which is a victory. A donkey tied to a post snorts at you in a way that suggests judgment. You ignore it. You continue on, weaving through the gentle buzz of the square. A woman selling bread waves at you with flour-dusted hands. "If you feel grimy later," she says, "heat stones by the fire and lay cloth over them. Steam will rise. Makes the skin soft." You imagine turning your home into a DIY sauna and realize medieval ingenuity is strong, if slightly chaotic. Somewhere, a rooster crows like it just realized it overslept. A breeze moves through the square, lifting bits of dust and carrying the faint smell of baking bread. You find yourself drifting with it, following no particular direction, except the one that feels most peaceful. That direction happens to lead toward a small wooden footpath lined with wildflowers, yellow, white, soft purple. Their scent brushes gently against you like a passing thought. Your steps slow, your mind softens. You take in the world around you, not as a visitor, but as someone briefly living inside it. For now, you're clean enough. And in this era, that's practically luxurious. As you follow the quiet footpath beyond the village square, the world seems to stretch out and breathe with you. Wildflowers nod gently, as if greeting a familiar friend, and the distant sound of wooden wheels bumping over uneven earth becomes a soft rhythm beneath the birdsong. The morning has matured now, warm, open, and carrying the subtle scent of damp soil baked dry by the rising sun. It's a good moment to exist, even if you're living in a century where cleanliness is more of a philosophy than an achievement. Ahead, you spot a woman kneeling beside a large wooden tub, placed in the yard behind her cottage. She's vigorously stirring something with a stick, the way someone might churn butter if they secretly hated butter. Curious, You step closer and catch a whiff of what could politely be described as aggressively unscented. The mixture inside is pale, frothy, and slightly thick. This is your historical fact for the section. Medieval people sometimes used animal fats, beef tallow, sheep fat, or even lard, boiled with ashes, to create early forms of soap. Not the brand you like, not even the brand you pretend to like, but workable enough to remove heavy grime. The woman looks up at you with a grin that suggests she's used to strangers being mildly horrified. "It'll harden overnight," she says proudly. "Then we cut it into bricks. Smells like old boots, cleans like magic." She leans in closer and whispers. You get used to the scent, eventually. You nod politely, deciding that eventually is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. A hen clucks at your feet, circling you, as if deciding whether you're edible. Thankfully, she decides you're not worth the paperwork. Moving along, you pass a man kneeling beside a small wooden bench. He's trimming the nails on one foot while balancing, quite precariously, on the other. He looks up long enough to give a nod of greeting before returning to his task. He uses a small knife, no fancy clippers here, and takes the process with the solemn focus of someone performing delicate surgery. Your obscure tidbit of this section arrives right here. Medieval people often treated personal grooming, including nail trimming and hair cutting, outdoors in bright sunlight, not for hygiene, but because light indoors was simply too dim. Grooming yourself was an event, the kind you scheduled around the sun like a very cautious sunflower. A few steps later, you see a group of women gathered at a long wooden bench, brushing each other's hair with bone or wooden combs. Lice, regrettably, are a common enemy here, and communal grooming is part hygiene, part bonding exercise, part tactical warfare. One woman holds up a comb triumphantly, as if she's captured a tiny invader. The group erupts into weary applause. Historians still debate whether medieval households struggled with lice constantly, or whether periodic boilings of bedding and clothing reduced infestations. "More than we assume," one woman says, as if she senses your curiosity and just happens to moonlight as an historian. "If you sleep near the hearth, the heat helps, but you have to rotate your bedding. It's a system." She says system like it's a full-time job. In a way, it is. You continue your walk, feeling increasingly grateful for shampoo. Near the end of the lane, a man is scraping the inside of a leather water pouch with sand. He pours a handful in, shakes vigorously, then rinses. The sand acts as a scouring agent, the medieval equivalent of saying, "I reject smoothness. Give me texture." When he finishes, he holds the pouch up to the light as though examining a gemstone, and smiles with satisfaction. "Clean as it gets," he declares, before noticing you. "Want a sip?" You politely decline. You find yourself wandering past a small herb garden, tended by an elderly woman, who moves with quiet precision. Lavender, sage, chamomile, and mint grow in tight rows, each plant carefully pruned. She plucks a few stems and hands them to you, as if giving away secrets. "Boil these," she says, then breathe the steam. Clears the head, clears the spirits, and sometimes, she adds with a wink, clears the nose after a goat wanders through your kitchen. You thank her, tucking the herbs gently into your belt like a medieval wellness influencer. The path begins to curve, drawing you toward a more wooded area. Tall trees rise ahead, their branches whispering to each other. The shade cools your skin instantly, easing the warmth you gathered from the sun. Fallen leaves crunch softly beneath your feet. The forest smells rich, earthy, warm, clean in ways the village is not. A small stream flows here, separate from the broad river you saw earlier. Its waters are clear, dancing lightly over smooth stones. You kneel and cup your hands in it, splashing your face and neck. The cold shocks you in the best way. A refreshing bite that resets your senses. Nearby, a boy crouches on a rock, rubbing his hands with what looks like sticky clay from the stream bed. Clay cleansing, an ancient method, still used, absorbs oils and dirt. He grins when he sees you watching. "You should try it," he says. "Feels like wearing fresh mud, and looks like it too." He smears more onto his arms proudly. You consider it for a moment. Maybe later. Maybe in a different lifetime. As you stand up and let the droplets trickle down your skin, a soft breeze stirs the trees. Somewhere deeper in the forest, a bird whistles a slow, calming tune. You find yourself walking again, feeling cleaner, not in the modern sense, but in the way that comes from moving slowly through a world that embraces imperfection with surprising gentleness. For now, you are scrubbed by steam, scented by herbs, cooled by streams, and humbled by animal fat soap. Not bad for one medieval morning. The forest path guides you deeper beneath its canopy, where sunlight filters, through the branches, in soft, golden fragments. Each ray feels warm but gentle, like a candle flame held just close enough to comfort you. The trees sway slowly, whispering their own private conversation above your head. The world here is quieter, calmer, wrapped in green and birdsong, an ideal place for someone with medieval hygiene standards to take a break from village odors. As you walk, the earthy scent of damp leaves rises around you, mingling with the distant aroma of pine resin. It's the kind of natural perfume that doesn't need marketing or pretty bottles. It just exists, quietly doing a better job than anything the villagers have attempted so far. You breathe it in and feel your chest loosen, your steps soften, and your mind settle comfortably into the rhythm of your surroundings. Ahead, a small clearing appears. In the center stands a woman carrying a basket filled with what looks like fresh moss, soft, bright green, almost glowing. She places the basket on a stump and begins sorting through it with practiced hands. You approach, curious. She glances up and offers a warm smile. Gathering moss for washing, she explains. Soft as lamb's wool and good for scrubbing little ones who won't stand still. She winks knowingly. Inside the basket, the moss looks plush and inviting, a medieval loofah in its most adorable form. This brings us to your historical fact. Moss was sometimes used as a gentle cleaning material or even as an absorbent wipe, especially for children or the elderly. It's surprisingly effective and far softer than cloth woven on rough medieval looms. You touch a piece cool, damp, springy. You understand immediately why mothers favor it. The woman laughs softly. Better than chasing them with a bucket of river water, she says, returning to her work. Birds flutter through the branches above, kicking small motes of light and dust into the air. You continue along the path, listening to the rustle of leaves under your feet. A squirrel darts across your way, pauses dramatically on a rock as if posing for a medieval tapestry, then scampers off when it decides you're not worth the artistic effort. Up ahead, you hear the soft splash of moving water. The path opens into another clearing, this one larger and edged by smooth stones. A shallow spring-fed pool lies at the center, its surface perfectly clear, reflecting the branches overhead like a polished shield. You kneel and touch the water. It's cold, almost painfully so, but undeniably pure. A man washing his face nearby looks over at you. Cold keeps you awake, he says, and keeps the dirt from sticking. Sometimes. He splashes another handful onto himself with a gasp that sounds equal parts pain and spiritual awakening. You notice he's scrubbing his arms with a handful of something grainy powdered barley, perhaps. Indeed, your obscure tidbit of this section. Finely ground grains were sometimes used as a primitive cleansing scrub. Barley, rye, and even pea flour were mixed with water to create a paste that exfoliated the skin gently. The man sees you watching and offers a small handful of wet barley grains. Try it, he insists. You rub a bit between your fingers. It feels soft, slightly gritty, but pleasant. A medieval skincare routine approved by agriculture. You rinse your hands in the spring. The cold water shocks you once again, sending a spark of clarity through your senses. Every droplet feels like a tiny reminder that the world, even without modern comforts, can still be kind. As you stand, a pair of young men carrying bundles of herbs stroll into the clearing. They kneel beside the water and begin soaking the bundles until the leaves darken. One of them explains, "We warm these later and press them to our skin. Helps with aches." He shrugs, "And it makes you smell better than goat." Comparatively low bar, but still a useful improvement. One of the men leans closer, lowering his voice. Historians still debate whether springs like this were used more for health, ritual, or simple convenience. Could be all three, could be none. Depends on who you ask and how cold the water is that day. He dips his fingers into the spring and yelps, "Too cold today." You laugh quietly and step back from the pool. The clearing is peaceful, and yet there's movement everywhere, ripples in the spring, drifting leaves, shifting shadows, quiet human rituals being carried out with sincerity and practicality. You move on, following a narrow thread of path deeper into the trees. Sunlight flickers through the branches in slow patterns. Occasionally, a patch of moss glows bright against the forest floor, a reminder that nature has always provided its own tools for living, cleaning included. A breeze rustles the canopy overhead, sending a cascade of whispers through the leaves. You pause, closing your eyes for a moment, letting the breeze brush against your cleanish skin. It's strange how refreshing this world can feel, even without soap. Maybe it's the air. Maybe it's the slowness. Maybe it's the fact that none of your clothes have floral detergents trying to sell you confidence. You continue walking, letting the forest guide you with its soft, timeless logic. And somewhere ahead, the medieval world waits with yet another inventive attempt at staying clean. The forest thins gradually as you walk, trading its deep green hush for a brighter landscape where sunlight falls in gentle sheets across rolling meadows. Grass sways in slow, sleepy patterns, brushing softly against your legs as though welcoming you back into open air. The smell here is warm and grassy, touched with a faint sweetness, almost like fresh bread, but made by plants with low aspirations. It's peaceful enough that you briefly forget you're living in an age where cleanliness requires creativity, courage, and a strong stomach. A narrow dirt road appears ahead, leading toward a cluster of small farmsteads scattered across the hills. Smoke curls lazily from a few chimneys, rising like thin, thoughtful scribbles against the sky. You follow the path toward the nearest farmhouse, drawn by the familiar human bustle that hums softly in the distance. As you approach, you spot a woman kneeling beside a large wooden trough. Steam drifts from the trough's surface, carrying the unmistakable smell of boiled grain. She stirs the mixture with a long paddle, pausing now and then to wipe the sweat from her brow with the back of her wrist. The consistency looks like porridge but less appetizing, as if breakfast and hygiene had an awkward collision. She looks up as you near. "It's mash," she explains. "Good for feeding pigs and better for washing cloth." She scoops a ladleful and pours it through a linen sheet stretched over a frame. The mash strains through, leaving behind oils and dirt from previously washed garments. This introduces your historical fact of the section. Before manufactured soap was common, people often soaked linens in starchy mixtures like wheat or barley mash to loosen grime. The starch created a kind of sticky film that lifted dirt away when rinsed. You touch the linen gently. It feels slick, almost glue-like. She laughs softly. It's messy, but it works. Mostly. She wiggles her eyebrows in a way that suggests results may vary, depending on stains and your emotional stability. Not far from the trough, a pair of men work beside a fire pit, heating water in a large iron cauldron suspended from a tripod. The bubbling water releases thick clouds of steam, fogging the air around them. One of the men drops handfuls of crushed lavender and juniper into the cauldron, sending up a sharp, herbal scent that cuts through the heaviness of the steam. He glances at you and smiles. "Herbs in the wash water keep the clothes smelling pleasant," he says. "Or at least, less offensive. We take what victories we can." You inhale the rising scent. It's crisp but calming. A medieval attempt at fabric softener with significantly fewer commercials. You continue down the road, passing a fenced meadow where sheep graze lazily, their wool thick and tangled. A shepherd leans on his crook, watching them with the relaxed posture of someone whose top 3 daily concerns all involve sheep. As you approach, he nods toward the animals. "Their wool is washed in the river," he says. "Not us. Mind you, just the wool," he chuckles. "People can wait. The wool sells better." This leads to your obscure tidbit for the section. Wool was often washed with mixtures of clay, urine, or gently warmed water that had been thickened with natural soda. The aim wasn't hygiene, but improving texture, removing grease, and prepping it for spinning. You give a sympathetic nod to the sheep. They stare back with silent judgment, chewing thoughtfully, possibly evaluating your own wool quality. A little farther along, you Spot a farmhouse porch where a young girl sits cross-legged, brushing her mother's long hair with a bone comb. The mother's eyes are half closed, in the kind of bliss that only accompanies scalp massage, or the sudden discovery that laundry day has been cancelled. The girl works carefully, using short, practiced strokes, and dips the comb periodically into a bowl filled with what looks like vinegar water. The mother opens one eye and explains, "Vinegar helps keep my hair smooth and the little pests away." She tilts her head conspiratorially. "And it smells sharp enough to make your husband behave." You laugh softly. Adding to the charm, the vinegar aroma wafts gently through the air, sharp, clean, and surprisingly pleasant in a world where other scents tend to be ambitious. Just beyond their porch, a man chops wood near a small shed. Every few swings, he pauses to wipe his forehead with a cloth. Then, rather casually, he picks up a small pouch from a shelf and rubs a pinch of something between his palms. You recognize the faint shimmer. It's powdered chalk. People sometimes dusted their hands and feet with chalk or crushed limestone to absorb sweat and reduce friction. The man grins as he notices your attention. "Keeps blisters away," he says, "and keeps me from smelling like a frightened goat." He resumes chopping, leaving you with that vivid comparison. A soft breeze moves through the meadow, carrying the warm scent of freshly cut wood. You follow the path toward a pair of distant barns, where the lowing of cattle echoes lazily in the morning air. The barns are open, revealing cows chewing cud in slow meditation. A farmhand stands nearby, brushing one of the cows with a handful of dried grasses. He looks up at you. "If you're dirty," he says, "sometimes mud helps." He gestures toward a shallow pit, where a mixture of soil and straw sits drying in the sun. It sticks to sweat and grime. Let it dry, then scrape it off. Good as a bath. He grins sheepishly. Well, maybe not good, but close. Historians still debate whether such mud scrubbing methods were widespread practices or simply occasional rural improvisations. Some believe mud was used for medicinal purposes. Others think it was a low-effort cleaning method for laborers. The truth likely lies somewhere in between, where practicality and superstition hold hands. You thank the farmhand and continue, walking through a patch of wild mint that releases a cool scent beneath your feet. The path winds gently, becoming softer and quieter until the sounds of farm life fade behind you, replaced by the whisper of wind over grass. You pause for a moment, closing your eyes. You feel the warmth of the sun on your face, a faint herbal scent trailing behind you from the mash, vinegar, chalk, and mint you've encountered. There's a simplicity here that relaxes you, an honest, human rhythm built from nature, necessity, and gentle perseverance. One thing becomes clear. In a world without modern soap, people didn't give up on staying clean. They got creative, industrious, a little chaotic, but never defeated. You step forward again, letting the road lead you toward whatever cleansing ritual the medieval world has invented next. The meadow narrows into a sloping path framed by hedgerows, their leaves brushing your sleeves with a soft, papery rustle as you walk. Bees drift lazily from flower to flower, humming so gently it feels like background music for someone trying very hard not to stay awake. The sun is climbing higher, warming your back, and the late morning light turns everything around you a mellow gold. It's the kind of moment that would be perfect for a picnic if medieval picnics didn't usually involve cold barley mush and questionable cheese. Ahead, you spot a small wooden structure tucked against a gentle rise in the land. Smoke curls from its roof, not in alarm, but in a cozy, domestic way. As you approach, the unmistakable scent of heated stone and damp earth greets you. You realize this is a sweat hut, a humble cousin to the bathhouse you visited earlier. Smaller, simpler, and a little more mysterious, like its introverted sibling. A woman sitting on a low stool outside greets you with a nod. Her hair is braided tightly, her sleeves rolled up, and her expression is the relaxed seriousness of someone supervising steam for a living. "We heat the stones inside," she explains, tapping her foot toward the hut, "and pour water on them. It keeps the bones loose, the air warm, and the spirits light." Your historical fact arrives right here. Sweat huts, sometimes called sweat houses or bathing huts, were used in parts of medieval Europe for both hygiene and healing. They relied on steam rather than soap, and people sometimes rubbed themselves with herbs, sand, or cloth afterward to remove grime loosened by heat. You step closer. The door opens briefly as a man exits in a cloud of steam, looking like he's been boiled but enjoys it. He gives you a blissful thumbs up before wandering away with the gait of someone who has transcended physical form. Inside, small piles of aromatic plants, yarrow, juniper, mint, hang drying from the beams. Their scent fills the air even before you enter, promising a cleansing that's more spiritual than scrubbed. The woman gestures toward a bowl containing a mix of crushed herbs and coarse salt. For rubbing on the skin, she explains. But go easy. Too much, and you'll feel rubbed raw as a carrot in a stew. A faint smile touches her lips. You decide moderation is key. A few steps beyond the hut, another woman kneels beside a shallow clay-lined pit filled with warm water. It's murky, but intentionally so. She stirs it slowly with a wooden stick, and at first glance, you think she's making soup until she lifts the stick and reveals soft grey streaks clinging to it. Clay bath. Your obscure tidbit of this section. In certain regions, people used clay mixed with warm water as a cleansing soak. Clay absorbs oils and impurities, making it an early, earthy form of skincare. It also leaves you looking like a statue halfway through being sculpted. A young boy stands nearby completely covered in drying clay, arms outstretched like a heroic figure in a very budget-friendly museum. Feels weird, he announces proudly. Like being hugged by cold bread, his mother snorts with laughter. You continue along the path, now marked by small stones placed neatly in a row. Each stone is etched with simple symbols, circles, spirals, lines, likely a boundary marker or a guide used by villagers. Medieval landscaping with mystical flair. The trail leads you toward a gently flowing brook. The water sparkles brightly, catching the sun in shimmering ripples that slide over smooth stones like liquid glass. A couple of villagers kneel at the bank, washing their faces and arms. One of them dips a cloth bag into the water and squeezes it vigorously until foam appears. You blink. Foam? She notices your confusion. It's saponin, she says, holding up the cloth bag. Inside are chopped roots from soapwort, a plant known for its natural foaming properties. Makes bubbles when you squeeze it. Good for delicate cloth. Good for skin too, if you don't mind smelling like a hedge. She hands you the bag. You squeeze it gently, and indeed, soft bubbles bloom across your hand. Primitive soap. Surprisingly pleasant. You wash your hands in the brook, the bubbles clinging to your fingers like tiny, excited ghosts. Historians still debate how widely soapwort was used, the woman adds, rinsing her cloth. Some say it was common in cottage gardens. Others say it was rare. Depends where you lived and whether your sheep ate it all first. You return the bag with a grateful nod. The brook continues its journey between the stones, its water so crisp it almost seems blue. You take a sip carefully, and it tastes clean, bright, uncomplicated. Exactly what you imagine water should taste like before humanity invented plumbing. As you walk on, you hear gentle scraping ahead. A man sits on a flat boulder, scraping his skin lightly with a curved piece of bone. He speaks before you ask. Scraping removes sweat and dust. Feels good too, like brushing away yesterday. It resembles ancient Roman strigils tools used to scrape the body clean after sweating. He demonstrates, dragging the bone gently along his arm. Small flecks of dust and dried sweat fall away. Primitive exfoliation, strangely graceful. Beyond him, the land opens into another quiet stretch of meadow. A breeze moves through the tall grass in soft waves, stirring the tips like rippling green water. You close your eyes, letting the sound wash over you, a whispery hush that feels like a natural lullaby. You inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and realize that despite the lack of modern comforts, you feel incredibly refreshed, softened, grounded, clean in ways that have nothing to do with fragrance and everything to do with time, breath, and presence. You move forward again, deeper into the medieval day, ready to discover whatever strange and gentle cleansing ritual comes next. The path gradually leaves the meadow behind and eases into a gentle rise, where scattered trees begin to reappear, thin, tall, spaced wide enough to let sunlight pour through them in soft sheets. The ground under your feet becomes springy with fallen needles and dry leaves. You breathe in deeply, catching faint hints of pine resin and cool earth. a scent so clean and grounding that it quietly shows up every bar of soap you've ever owned. A little farther ahead, the trees open into a modest woodland clearing, dotted with wooden racks. At first, you think someone has hung laundry here, fluttering gently in the breeze like medieval prayer flags. But as you get closer, you realize it's not cloth at all. It's strips of bark, freshly peeled, thin, pale as bone. A man stands beside one of the racks, carefully scraping the inside of a bark strip with a flat stone. He turns as you approach, smiling with the weary friendliness of someone who has spent all morning peeling trees. Birch, he explains, boiled and scraped, makes good wash water. Your historical fact arrives right here. Birch bark contains natural compounds like betulin that make birch infusions mildly antiseptic. Some medieval communities boiled birch bark to create cleansing water used for washing hair, wounds, or even wooden utensils. The man lifts a bucket filled with pale, cloudy liquid. Smells sharp, he warns. You sniff. He's right. It smells like something between mint, resin, and responsibility. But it feels clean in an earnest, hard-working way. Nearby, a woman with long hair sits on a low stool while another pours warm birch infusion over her head. The water streams down in glossy rivulets, darkening her hair and releasing an unmistakably woodsy aroma. She sighs with a softness that suggests this is as luxurious as a medieval salon gets. The woman pouring glances at you. Keeps the hair smooth, she says, and keeps the lice from thinking they own the place. She offers you a small wooden cup of the infusion. You dip your fingers in. It feels cool, slightly slippery, and faintly fragrant like a forest breath captured in liquid form. You continue through the clearing, following a worn footpath where sunlight patches dance slowly across the ground. A few steps later, you find 3 boys kneeling beside a fallen log. They're collecting handfuls of something crumbly and ochre-colored. Clay? No, not this time. It's rotted wood dust, powdery, light, soft. One of the boys stands and, with the seriousness of an apprentice wizard, pours a handful into a small leather pouch. Dust baths, he says, keeps the skin dry. Sure enough, he dusts his forearms lightly, leaving a thin coat that absorbs moisture instantly. Your obscure tidbit of this section, powder from decayed wood, especially punky, spongy pieces, was sometimes used as an early form of body powder or deodorizer. It was valued for being absorbent, soft, and surprisingly, pleasant-smelling. The boy grins proudly, showing arms now coated in a fine golden beige sheen. Better than sweating like a pig in church, he declares. His friend nods solemnly, confirming the wisdom. You walk on, amused and slightly impressed. The path dips into a little hollow where a stream trickles gently over dark stones. A group of women are gathered here, their skirts hitched up, washing wool and cloth. They use round stones to beat the wet fabric rhythmically, thump, 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 a steady pulse that blends with the murmur of water. One woman spreads a cloth on a rock beside her, sprinkles it with a white powder, and brushes it in with firm strokes. When she sees your puzzled look, she lifts the bowl. Full as earth, she explains. Makes the fabric soft and clean. Works on skin too, if you're patient enough. She dips her fingers into the powder and dusts them lightly across her face. Keeps the shine away, she adds. Medieval mattifying powder, centuries before cosmetics, counters, and fluorescent lighting. A younger washerwoman looks at you, laughs, and says, "Don't try it on your tongue." You take her word for it. A short distance away, an elderly man sits on a rock with a small wooden bowl at his feet. He stirs something slowly, a warm, glossy mixture that catches the sunlight. Beeswax and oil, by the look of it. Without glancing up, he says, "For the skin. Protects from wind and keeps cracks away." He dips a fingertip into the mixture and rubs it gently across his knuckles. They gleam faintly. Historians still debate whether these simple wax balms were more common in cold climates or universally used by people with hard-working hands, he says, as though reciting from memory. I think comfort travels. A good salve is a good salve anywhere. You sit beside the stream for a moment, letting its cool whisper fill your ears. The light shimmering through the branches paints soft patterns on the water, and you notice how the villagers move around you with a quiet cooperation, each with their own method, their own ritual. their own way of staying clean in a world that isn't built for convenience. You dip your hand into the stream. The water is cool but gentle, slipping between your fingers like a promise you don't need to hold tightly. You splash your face, and the droplets cling to your skin, refreshing, simple, alive. Rising again, you take one last look at the clearing, the birch bark racks, the wool washers, the children dusting themselves with forest powder, and step forward onto the path that leads deeper into the medieval day. You feel clean in ways you don't fully understand, yet clean not from soap, but from quiet routines, fresh air, and the soft persistence of nature. You walk on. The forest thins once more, giving way to broad, gentle fields dotted with tiny white flowers that sway like sleepy lanterns in the breeze. The air is warm, carrying the soft hum of insects and the distant bleating of goats with absolutely zero awareness of personal space. You walk along a worn track that winds between low wooden fences, each one leaning slightly, as though participating in a slow-motion collapse competition. A young goatherd stands near one of the fences, ankle-deep in grass, holding a small pail. He's pouring water over his hands and rubbing them briskly with crushed leaves. When he notices you, he lifts a hand in greeting. "Mint leaves," he explains. "Helps with the smell." He glances toward the goats, who stare back with expressions of smug purity. "Their smell," he clarifies. "Not mine." Your historical fact arrives here. Many medieval people used strongly scented herbs, such as mint, rosemary, sage, or marjoram to rub on their hands and clothing, masking both sweat and the unavoidable bouquet of daily labor. For those who worked with livestock, herbs were less a luxury and more an occupational necessity. He tosses you a leaf. You rub it lightly between your fingers, releasing a bright, fresh scent sharp enough to cut through the earthy air around you. It's surprisingly uplifting, like a medieval breath mint, but for your skin. You continue along the path, passing a small pasture where women are spreading long strips of linen across the grass. The fabric glows in the sun, looking far cleaner than anything in this era has the right to look. One woman calls out, "Sun bleaching," and waves her arm as if presenting a state-of-the-art technique. Here comes your obscure tidbit. Before chemical whiteners existed, people often laid wet cloth across grass in direct sunlight. The combination of moisture, chlorophyll, and UV light naturally bleached the fabric over time. It was slow, but effective. The youngest woman gestures for you to look closer. "See the spots already fading?" she says, pointing at subtle patches where the fabric has begun to lighten. "Sun does the work if you're patient. And if the geese, don't walk on it first." You glance over your shoulder just in time to see a goose waddling toward the linens with the confidence of someone who pays rent. You leave before violence erupts. Up ahead, a man is tending a large copper pot set over a fire. Steam coils upward, carrying with it a slightly sweet, earthy aroma. He stirs with a long wooden paddle, humming under his breath. When you approach, he lifts the paddle and shows you the thick liquid clinging to it. "Soap root broth," he says. "We boil the roots, strain the muck, and use what's left to wash wool." He hands you a piece of the root, a knobby, pale thing with an earthy scent. "Softens the fibers," he continues, "and it lathers, if you hit it hard enough." He smacks the paddle against the side of the pot, producing a small puff of foam. He beams proudly, as if he's invented modern chemistry. Beyond him, a woman scrubs wooden bowls with coarse sand. She dips each bowl into a basin of warm water afterward, rubbing it vigorously with a bundle of straw. "Keeps them smooth," she says. "Sand cuts the grime. Straw carries it off." She offers you the bundle. It scratches your fingers like a friendly but assertive cat. A few paces farther, a pair of older women sit beneath a shaded awning, cleaning their hands with vinegar diluted in water. The sharp scent wafts through the air, tart, clean, undeniably effective. One of them dips her cloth again and says to you, "Good for the skin, good for warding off bad smells, good for warding off worse neighbors." Her friend elbows her in mock offense. One of the women leans closer. Historians still debate whether regular vinegar rinses were a peasant habit, a housewife's trick, or a regional tradition. But I say, anyone with a nose uses vinegar when they can. She nods decisively, ending the argument. You walk onward, leaving the vinegar cloud behind. The path dips slightly, and leads you toward a small pond, surrounded by reeds, dragonflies, and frogs engaged in an ongoing symphonic competition. A young man kneels at the edge, mixing ash and water into a paste. He smears a bit onto his hands, rubs thoroughly, then rinses in the pond. Cuts grease, he says. Burnt wood knows how to cling to things, so it pulls the dirt off. He holds out his hands, they do look cleaner, in a rustic, I tried sort of way. Nearby, a girl sits brushing her feet with a handful of dried twigs tied together like a tiny broom. For scrubbing, she explains. We make new ones every week. Old ones become fire starters. She pauses, then adds, or swords, depends who gets them first. A boy runs by holding one overhead like a knight charging into battle. You pause at the pond's edge. The surface is smooth, reflecting clouds drifting slowly across the sky. You splash a little water onto your face. It feels cool and calming, wiping away whatever traces of steam hut clay, forest dust, or goat hair have followed you here. A soft wind ripples the pond. Birds call overhead. Everything slows. You sit on a flat rock for a moment, letting the quiet settle over you like a thin blanket. You feel the warmth of the day, the scent of mint still faint on your fingers, the residual coolness of pond water on your cheeks. It becomes clear that cleanliness in this era is less about soap and more about adaptation using whatever the land offers. Leaves, clay, vinegar, sunlight, steam, sand, roots. It's messy, earnest, and surprisingly tender. You rise again, warmed by the sun and your slowly expanding understanding of medieval life. And with that, you continue deeper into the long, cleanish day. The road curves gently away from the pond, guiding you toward a quiet stretch of countryside where the landscape widens into a rolling patchwork of fields. The air here feels clearer, lighter, as if it's been washed by the breeze itself. You follow the gentle curve of a small stream running parallel to the path, its water curling and bubbling over smooth stones like it's humming to itself. Up ahead, you see a group of women kneeling along the bank, each with a small wooden bowl and a bundle of narrow reeds. Their hands move with calm, rhythmic precision, stripping the reeds apart and weaving them into tight little mats, not for sleeping, not for decoration, but for washing. One of them notices your curiosity and lifts her mat proudly. Reed scrubbers, she says. Soft enough for skin, strong enough for dirt. She drags it lightly over her forearm, and you see faint flecks of dust fall away. It looks surprisingly gentle. Your historical fact arrives here. In some medieval regions, woven reed or straw pads were used as early washcloths or exfoliating tools. They were easy to make, biodegradable, and surprisingly effective, especially when dipped in warm water or herbal infusion. The women work steadily, their fingers flying with the confidence of those who've made hundreds of these mats. One woman dips her finished scrubber into the stream, then squeezes it out. The water runs clear, carrying tiny bits of grass and dust downstream. You follow the stream a little farther and find a man kneeling beside a flat stone slab. He's grinding something with a small mortar seeds, by the look of it. When he notices you, he lifts the bowl proudly. Flaxseed paste, he says. Feels slimy, but good for the skin. He dips 2 fingers into the mixture and smears it on his forearm. The paste glistens briefly before sinking into his skin, keeps things smooth, and, he adds, leaning closer, makes the chickens think twice before pecking. Your obscure tidbit of this section, flaxseed, when soaked and crushed, produces a natural gel-like substance. Medieval people sometimes used it as a moisturizer or conditioning rinse for skin, hair, and even leather. A multi-purpose slime before slime was trendy. You test a tiny bit. It's slick, cool, and surprisingly pleasant. A medieval spa treatment with the vibe of porridge. Nearby, a young man stands barefoot at the edge of the stream, rubbing his legs with a handful of crushed walnut shells. Good for tough spots, he says, scrubbing vigorously. Gets off the grime after field work. Walnut shells, gritty and fibrous, act as a natural exfoliant, capable of removing stubborn dirt and possibly stubborn personality traits if applied too firmly. A few steps away, a pair of teenagers are boiling something in a small clay pot over a fire. The smell hits you before the sight. Pungent, earthy, strangely metallic. Alum water, one of them explains proudly, lifting the pot. A cloudy liquid swirls inside, good for stopping sweat, or at least slowing it. He dabs a bit on his neck with the confidence of someone using an early antiperspirant. You sniff cautiously, sharp, mineral-like, not unpleasant. Historians still debate whether alum was used mainly for textile, cleaning, leather work, or personal hygiene. He continues, waving his pot like a professor. But it works, so we don't complain. You nod, because no matter the era, anyone trying to control body odor deserves your respect. The path draws you onward until you reach a small stone bridge, arched just enough to feel important, weathered just enough to seem wise. Moss creeps along its edges like a soft green fringe. Beneath it, the stream widens into a shallow pool. A woman sits at the water's edge, her sleeves rolled up, rinsing her hair in the pool while rubbing a pulpy mixture into the strands. She lifts her head briefly and says, "Apple pulp." Makes the hair shiny. Strands of red gold gleam in the sun. She lifts a chunk from her bowl, also keeps it from tangling. Sometimes. Fruit as conditioner. Another medieval innovation by necessity. You continue across the bridge, feeling the stones warm beneath your steps. On the other side, a pair of older men sit in the math, shade of a withered tree, scraping their feet with smooth pieces of shale. One looks up at you and nods approvingly. "Stone keeps the calluses honest," he says. "Too soft and you slip, too hard and you limp." He demonstrates by dragging the stone slowly along his heel. You try not to flinch. Behind them, a woman is boiling water in a large pot. Steam rises in thick plumes. She lifts the lid briefly, releasing the scent of rosemary and thyme. "Steam baths for the hands," she explains. "Good for stiffness. Good for the smell, too." She dips her hands in the steam, and her shoulders relax instantly. You're tempted to try, and when you do, the warmth feels divine. It sinks into your fingers, easing tension you didn't know you had. You continue walking until the stream fades behind you, and the air grows quieter, filled now with the soft clicking of insects and the gentle brush of wind through tall grass. Your hands smell faintly herbal. Your skin feels warm and lightly scrubbed. There's a softness to the moment, a slow, breathing calm that lingers, like the last note of a lullaby. Cleanliness, you realize, isn't just a state here, it's a practice, a rhythm, a conversation with nature. And your day, somehow, feels fresher with every step. The road eases into a gentle bend, leading you toward a flatter stretch of land where the village's farmland gives way to a quiet, slow-moving countryside. The fields are wider here, waving softly in the breeze like an ocean of green and gold. Birds perch on fence posts, fluttering off only when you get close enough for them to reconsider their life choices. The air carries hints of warm grass, crushed leaves, and a faint sweetness, almost like honey, drifting from somewhere unseen. Up ahead, you notice a small gathering of people near a low, circular stone structure. Curious, you wander closer. As you approach, the smell hits you first. A mixture of warm earth, herbs, and something faintly alkaline. Inside the stone circle is a shallow pit lined with ash and heated stones. A woman stirs the contents with a long stick. "Lye pit," she explains without looking up. "We mix the ash with water, let it settle, then draw off the lye for cleaning." She gestures toward a wooden trough where cloudy liquid drips slowly from a spout at the bottom. Your historical fact lands here. Medieval lye, used for washing laundry or making soap, was made by leaching water through hardwood ashes. The resulting liquid was alkaline enough to cut through grease and lift stains, though it required caution, skill, and perhaps a bit of nerve. The woman nods toward a piece of cloth soaking nearby. "Strong stuff," she says. "Use too much, and your tunic becomes a memory." She grins, as if remembering a personal tragedy involving an overzealous wash day. A young boy sits beside her, straining the lye through a cloth bag into a clay jar. "Don't let it touch your eyes," he warns cheerfully, despite being at an age where warnings are usually followed by demonstrations. You leave them to their alchemical endeavors and continue toward a shaded grove just beyond the pit. The trees here are tall and graceful, their trunks patterned with pale grey bark. Beneath them, a pair of women collect lichen scraped carefully from the bark with small wooden knives. One woman holds up a handful. "Crush it, soak it, Makes a good rinse for the skin, she says, as if sharing a secret passed down for generations. Smells better than you'd think, and keeps the skin calm. Your obscure tidbit of this section: certain lichens, when soaked, create mildly antimicrobial solutions that medieval people used as skin washes, especially in regions where other cleansing herbs were harder to find. You watch as she grinds the lichen with a stone, forming a soft, fragrant paste. She rubs a little onto her wrist, revealing faint foam when she adds a splash of water. You're impressed, and she smiles knowingly, like she just converted you into a lichen believer. Beyond the grove, the land dips into a shallow valley where a cluster of huts sits nestled around a small creek. A few villagers are gathered near the water, each performing some version of hygiene with the creativity of medieval engineers and the grace of tired parents. One man sits on the creek's edge, pouring warm beer over his hair. You blink. Twice. He notices your expression and shrugs. Flat beer is better than cold water, he says. Softens the hair too. He lifts a handful of soaked hair with the pride of someone giving himself a brewery-sponsored makeover. Another woman is scrubbing her hands with a mixture of oatmeal and vinegar, forming a light paste she rubs vigorously over her fingers. Good for the skin, she says, and for the smell, mostly. The faint scent of sour grain wafts around her, oddly pleasant, like the memory of bread dough that tried its best. You step closer to the creek. A little girl sits on a large rock, dipping her feet into the water while holding a small bunch of horsetail reeds. She brushes her legs lightly, the thin green reeds leaving soft streaks on her skin. Horsetail polish, she says proudly. Makes you shiny. Indeed, horsetail plants contain silica and were historically used for scrubbing metal, wood, and apparently children. You dip your hand in the creek, then brush it lightly with a reed. It leaves your skin feeling smooth, cool, and slightly invigorated, like a medieval spa treatment sponsored by plants with a sense of duty. A man carrying a bucket of warm water waves you over. Inside the bucket floats a handful of crushed bay leaves. For scent, he says. And to wake the mind, he splashes some onto his neck. Steam rises gently in the warm air, releasing a sharp, comforting aroma. Historians still debate whether bay leaf washes were common practice or more of a seasonal indulgence, he says, thoughtfully. Depends how many trees you had, and how much you liked your neighbors. You smile, letting the scent drift toward you. It feels fresh, earthy, grounding, like waking slowly in a cozy wooden cabin. As you stroll away from the creek, the path widens again. The soft murmur of water fades behind you, replaced by the rustle of wind through tall grass. Your skin feels cool, lightly scrubbed, faintly scented, with a strange but comforting mix of mint, lichen, beer, and bay leaf. You take a long breath. The world around you feels calm and honest. Cleanliness here isn't a final destination. It's a conversation, a negotiation, an improvised dance between nature and necessity. And as you continue down the path, the day stretches before you, with the promise of even more curious, clever methods people once used to feel refreshed in a world without soap. The path leads you gently uphill, into an area where the land is dotted with orchards, rows of apple, pear, and plum trees stretching neatly across the slope. Their leaves shimmer softly in the breeze, scattering speckles of sunlight across the ground. As you walk, fallen fruit perfumes the air with a faint sweetness, the kind of scent that could convince anyone they're cleaner than they truly are. A pair of women stand beneath a pear tree, gathering fallen fruit into baskets. One of them pauses to wipe her hands on her apron, then splashes her face with water from a small gourd flask. You notice the water looks slightly cloudy, not dirty, but infused. Rose water, she explains when she sees you watching. Helps with the heat. Helps with the smell. Helps with the day. She pats her cheeks and sighs contentedly. Here's your historical fact of this section. Distilled floral waters, rose water especially, were used in parts of medieval Europe for both personal cleansing and light perfume. Before alcohol-based perfumes became common, these gentle distillates offered a way to smell pleasant without overwhelming the senses. She offers you a drop on your wrist. It's cool, faintly floral, and calming like the whisper of a petal against your skin. You move on through the orchard, where the earth under your boots becomes soft with fallen leaves and fruit. A young boy crouches near a tree trunk, rubbing his hands vigorously with something pale and crumbly. You lean in to look. Applewood ash, he says proudly, keeps your hands clean. Indeed, ash from fruit-bearing trees was considered gentler and finer than that from harder woods. He demonstrates by sprinkling a bit onto his palms, adding a splash of water from a clay cup, then scrubbing. The mixture forms a thin, gritty paste. It makes things smooth, he says, holding out his hands for your inspection. And indeed, they look surprisingly clean. A bit farther along, you reach the wooden shed built between the trees. Smoke puffs lazily from a hole in the roof. Inside, a man stirs a steaming pot filled with herbs and peelings. Citrus rind, apple skins, even crushed grape seeds. Fruit boil, he says, for hair. He ladles out a bit of the liquid to show you it's faintly golden and smells like warm cider mixed with summer sunlight. Your obscure tidbit. Fruit rinses, especially those made from apple or citrus, were used to soften hair, add shine, and reduce tangles long before commercial conditioners existed. The natural acids cut through grease, while the pectin smoothed the strands. You want some? He asks, raising an eyebrow. Before you can decline, a woman nearby chimes in. Go on. It makes your hair behave. She taps her own braid, which indeed looks pleasingly glossy. You thank them both. Maybe later. Maybe not. Leaving the shed, you follow the orchard rows until the trees begin to thin. Ahead, you see a cluster of wooden benches set in a circle around a flat stone. On the stone sits a bowl of cloudy liquid and a bundle of leafy branches. Several villagers occupy the benches, dipping cloths into the bowl and rubbing their arms. You approach cautiously. Stinging nettle soak, one woman explains. She lifts a cloth dripping with the solution and wrings it out. Burns a little, but it wakes the skin, clears things. Nettles were believed to improve circulation when infused or applied lightly, though lightly is the operative word. She notices your hesitation and laughs. Don't worry, we removed the worst sting. You touch the cloth. It tingles a warm, prickly sensation, like a very polite electric shock. Historians still debate whether nettle use was primarily medicinal or cosmetic, she says. But my mother swore by it. She shrugs. And mothers are always right. As you leave the nettle circle behind, you hear the gentle sound of trickling water. A few more steps bring you to a simple wooden spout driven into the hillside. Clear spring water pours steadily into a moss-lined basin. A man washes his face there, splashing handfuls over his cheeks and neck. Spring water's the best, he says with a grin. Cold enough to make you reconsider all your decisions, but clean as the sky. He steps aside to let you try. You lean down and cup your hands beneath the stream. The water is cold, sharper than anything you've felt yet, and startlingly pure. It bites at your skin in a refreshing way, leaving your face tingling. A small wooden sign beside the spout reads, "For water, for spirit, for peace." A poetic reminder that even the simplest moments, cold water, clean hands, a quiet hillside once meant something sacred. You sit for a moment on a mossy stone nearby, letting droplets slide down your neck. The orchard rustles softly behind you. The spring murmurs. The sunlight warms your shoulders. Here, cleanliness feels less like a chore and more like a quiet ritual, a moment of returning to yourself. When you rise again, you feel refreshed in a way that's half physical, half emotional. The gentle reset. You step back onto the path, ready for whatever the medieval day brings next. The path winds gently out of the orchard, guiding you down toward a flatter stretch of land, where a cluster of small workshops sit scattered along the roadside. Wooden roofs slope low, and thin plumes of smoke rise from chimneys like quiet exhalations. The air here smells different, less of herbs and orchards, and more of leather, wool, warm metal, and the faint spice of fermented something or other. It's the scent of handiwork, industry, and people trying their best not to smell like yesterday. As you step closer, a man stands outside a small workshop, hunched over a trough filled with cloudy grey water. He dips a cloth bag into the mixture, kneads it a few times, and squeezes out thick drips of what looks like milky sludge. He notices you watching. "Alum wash," he explains. "For cloth and for armpits. If you're desperate." He grins, revealing far too many teeth for someone handling questionable liquids. Inside the bag are crushed minerals dissolved into a solution that was used to stiffen fabric and help reduce odor. Your historical fact of this section: alum, a naturally occurring mineral, was widely used in medieval Europe as both a textile mordant and an early deodorant. People applied diluted alum solutions to their underarms or feet to reduce moisture and smell. Primitive, but surprisingly effective. The man pats his shirt proudly. Dry as a bone, he says, and less stinky than my brother. He points toward the next workshop, where someone sneezes loud enough to rattle the windows. You continue down the row. A tanner sits outside his shed, rubbing his arms with a mixture made from oak bark powder and warm water. The mixture stains his skin, a faint brown, but he doesn't seem to mind. Oak keeps the skin tough, he says. And the smell away. He sniffs his forearm thoughtfully. Mostly. Nearby, a couple of older women are working with wool, teasing it apart and cleaning it with a mixture of soap-wort foam and rainwater. One of them pauses to wet her hair with a small jug of what looks like muddy water. Fuller's slurry, she explains before you can react. Good for stripping grease. She massages it through her hair with the confidence of someone who's been doing this for decades. Rinse well, or don't. Depends whether you're seeing anyone important. Your obscure tidbit: Fuller's earth clay rich in magnesium and silica was used not only to clean cloth, but sometimes to wash hair and skin. The clay absorbed oils, leaving things feeling less greasy, and sometimes a bit dusty. The woman squeezes out her hair, leaving pale streaks of clay on her apron. Looks worse than it feels, she assures you. A little farther along, you come across a plusk man sitting cross-legged beside a wooden barrel. He's rubbing something thick and white across the soles of his feet. Goose fat, he says cheerfully when you step closer. Keeps the skin soft, helps with cracks, and smells nicer than you'd think. He wiggles his toes proudly, little glistening sausages in the sun. You blink, filing the moment away with all the dignity medieval hygiene sometimes refuses to provide. Just beyond him, a young woman is rinsing a bundle of cloth in a basin of lime water. She handles it carefully, using a wooden stick, avoiding contact with her skin. Softens the fibers, she says, but don't get it in your eyes, unless you want to see the spirit world early. Historians still debate whether lime water was commonly used for personal washing, or only for textiles, she adds casually, as if she's reading your mind. My grandmother swore by it, but she also swore at it, so who knows? You continue walking, grateful you haven't accidentally dipped a hand into anything sharp or spicy yet. A blacksmith stands at the far end of the road, cooling heated metal in a trough. Steam hisses upward as he dips the iron, and the water takes on a slightly metallic smell. After finishing his work, he scoops a little of the cooling water into a separate bowl. For the hands, he says, metal water keeps the skin from cracking. Don't drink it unless you want to regret everything. He dips his hands and wipes them dry on a cloth. They look surprisingly smooth for someone who works with fire all day. Behind the blacksmith shop, you find a quieter space. A small garden bordered by woven sticks. Here, herbs grow in tidy clusters. Lavender, thyme, hyssop, yarrow. An elderly woman tends them with slow, practiced movements. She plucks a handful of lavender and rubs it between her palms. For scent, she says. For calm. For greeting your neighbors without embarrassment. She tucks a sprig into your belt as if offering a blessing. She then lifts a clay pot filled with warm lavender water. Rinse your hands, she says softly. You do. The water is warm, floral, soothing like a tiny vacation for your skin. The scent lingers faintly, soft but steady. When you step away, the sun has moved higher. The workshops hum behind you with the sounds of scraping, pouring, rinsing, and the occasional argument about who used all the mint leaves. You walk farther down the road, your hands lightly scented with lavender, your skin carrying the faint warmth of herbal rinse. Cleanliness, here, is a kind of resilience, a series of small rituals held together by determination, creativity, and hope. You take one more breath of warm countryside air and continue onward through the medieval day. The road begins to narrow again, curving toward a low rise, where a cluster of cottages sits nestled beneath tall elm trees. Their branches spread wide like giant green umbrellas, shading the homes and scattering trembling leaf shadows across the ground. The air here feels cooler, softer, the kind of cool that soothes the skin and makes the world feel unhurried. As you approach, you notice a group of villagers gathered around a long wooden bench set beside a shallow ditch filled with clear water. The bench holds bowls, bundles of herbs, small sacks of powders, and various improvised tools. It looks like an outdoor hygiene station, primitive, earnest, and charmingly chaotic. A woman sits at one end, rubbing a mixture of ground barley and warm water onto her arms. "Good exfoliant," she says, glancing up, "takes off the grime. And if you lick your arm afterward, well, that's your business." Your historical fact of this section: medieval people often used grain-based scrubs, barley, oat, wheat flour mixed with water to clean their skin. The mild abrasiveness loosened dirt and oil without the need for soap. You touch a little of the mixture. It feels grainy but soft, like a very confident breakfast cereal trying a career change. Next to her, an older man sits with a small wooden bowl filled with heated ivy leaves. He presses the warm leaves against his hands and wrists, sighing deeply. "Opens the pores," he says, "and keeps the skin soft." The leaves leave a faint, greenish scent, sharp, earthy, but comforting. A younger man nearby dips a cloth into a basin of steaming water that contains sliced onions. He wipes his face vigorously, ignoring your raised eyebrows. "Onion steam," he says proudly, "cleans the pores, clears the head, makes you cry less later." He sniffs, wiping a tear. Or more. Hard to say. Your obscure tidbit: onion water or steam was occasionally used for cleansing and circulation. The sulfur compounds were believed to open the skin and help purge impurities. Medieval skincare was not shy. You move along the bench. A woman is brushing her nails with a small bundle of stiff grass tied together with string. Softens the cuticles, she explains, and gets rid of dirt under the nails. Plus it's free. She beams. Free is important. Her friend beside her dips a feather into a cup of salt water, using it to gently clean the corners of her eyes. "Salt keeps the infections away," she murmurs. "Burns a little. Keeps you honest." You're tempted to point out that tears also burn, but she seems committed to the routine. Farther down, a boy sits with his feet in the shallow ditch, scrubbing them with a rough stone. "Warm rock bath," he says. "Pebbles feel good." Indeed, the sun-warmed stones in the water gently massage his feet as he moves them. Behind the bench stand two men working with fermented honey water, a cloudy drink called mead dregs. One man pours it slowly over a set of wooden stirring paddles, rubbing them clean with a cloth. "Sticky stuff removes sticky stuff," he tells you. Works on hands too. He dips his fingers, rubs them briskly, then rinses. The scent left behind is faintly sweet. A woman approaches holding a bowl of baking ash made from burned fruitwood. "For the hair," she says, "just a sprinkle." She tilts her head, and a soft shower of ash lands across her scalp. She rubs it in gently, makes it fuller. Smells like a campfire, but a good campfire. Historians still debate whether ash was used more for volume, cleansing, or simply convenience, she adds. Probably all three. We take what works. Behind her, a small child is lifting handfuls of cool mud and patting them onto her legs. Her mother gives a resigned sigh. "Skin treatment," she explains. Or play. Hard to tell. You continue past the cottages, stepping back into the sunlight. To your right, a shepherd kneels beside a trough, dipping his hands into a warm brine. "Sheep salt," he says. "Keeps the skin tight." He flexes dramatically, though the effect is slightly ruined when a sheep headbutts his shoulder with affectionate rudeness. A bit farther, a woman grinds bayberries into a paste. When she sees you watching, she smears a tiny dot on your wrist. "Smell that," she says. "It's sharp, spicy, earthy. We use it before visits. Helps with confidence." As you continue down the lane, the sounds of the village fade gently behind you. The air becomes quieter, the breeze cooler, the sunlight warmer. Your skin bears faint scents of barley, ivy, honey water, and bay. You have been steamed, scrubbed, dusted, polished, and possibly seasoned. Yet, you feel refreshed. Not perfectly clean, but clean in a way that fits this world. Clean in spirit, clean in rhythm. You walk on, letting the medieval day open before you like a slow, wandering path toward the next curious ritual. The path leads you away from the cottages and toward a wide, open clearing where the grass grows in soft waves and the sky stretches endlessly above. The air is still here, calm, warm, almost sleepy, and you feel your pace slow, instinctively, as if the land itself is asking you to walk gently. In the center of the clearing sits a stone well, its wooden bucket resting beside it with a lazy tilt. Several villagers are gathered around, each taking turns using the well for tasks that go beyond simple drinking. As you approach, an older woman hoists the bucket up and pours cool, clear water into a shallow basin at her feet. "Good spring water," she says, splashing her face. "Makes the skin bright." She gestures for you to try. When you do, the coldness hits you with the force of a polite slap, waking your senses instantly. The water feels impossibly fresh, cleaner than anything else you've touched today, as if it fell straight through a cloud moments ago. Your historical fact of this section: medieval communities often valued specific wells or springs for their pure water, not only for drinking but for cleansing rituals, wound washing, and even early forms of skin care. Some wells were believed to have healing properties, whether due to mineral content or spiritual lore. A younger woman kneels beside the basin, adding crushed mint and sage into the water. The leaves swirl around your fingers when you dip your hand. "Keeps the skin cool," she says. "Stops itching. Smells nice too." Indeed, the scent rises in a soft, refreshing cloud. Next to her, a boy is brushing his arms with a handful of straw dipped in warm water. "Gets the dust off," he says with a grin. "Makes you smooth." The straw scrapes gently, more pleasant than it looks, like a rustic version of a spa brush. A few steps away, a man sits on a low stool, rubbing his hands with fine river silt, a pale grey mud that oozes like thick cream. "Good for the joints," he says. "And the dirt." He flexes his fingers proudly, as though expecting applause for becoming a human clay pot. Your obscure tidbit of this section: certain river silts, especially from slow-moving streams, were prized for their silky texture and used as a gentle skin polish. In some regions, people believed the minerals in the silt fed the skin. A small group of children play near the well, one of them carrying a wooden cup filled with vinegar water. She dips a cloth in it and wipes her brother's neck with a seriousness far beyond her years. "Mama says this keeps the flies away," she explains. You're not sure if it's true, but the vinegar does give off a sharp, assertive aroma that commands respect. Near the well's edge, a woman kneels with a bucket full of warm whey, a byproduct of cheesemaking. She dips her hands into it before rubbing the liquid along her arms. The faint scent of dairy drifts to you, surprisingly gentle and sweet. "Softens the skin," she says. "Makes it glow." Many medieval households used whey for washing, since the lactic acid acted as a mild cleanser. You continue toward the far side of the clearing, where a small wooden table sits under the shade of a leaning oak. On the table are bowls filled with crushed elderflowers, ground chamomile, and tiny piles of blue woad powder. A man stands behind the table mixing the powders carefully. "For the skin," he says, offering a pinch of elderflower. "Stops redness, and smells like summer." He lifts another bowl. "Chamomile calming. For the face or the mind." Then he points to the woad. "Not for washing, for scaring enemies." You step back politely from the woad. A woman sits nearby, brushing her hair with a hand-carved wooden comb soaked in lavender water. Each stroke leaves her hair smooth and lightly scented. She hums as she works, a soft melody carried by the breeze. You take a seat on a stump for a moment, letting the quiet activity wash over you. People rinse, scrub, brush, splash, and dab themselves with the precision of a community that has turned cleaning into daily art. No one rushes, no one hurries. Cleanliness isn't a task, it's a moment of pause. A breeze stirs the clearing. You close your eyes and breathe deeply. The scents around you, mint, sage, lavender, cool spring water, blend into a soothing cloud. Your skin feels refreshed, your mind calm, your senses softened. Historians still debate whether these gatherings were intentional hygiene rituals or simply practical places where chores overlapped. Someone says behind you. You turn to see an elderly man dipping his hands into a bowl of warm herb water. I say, it doesn't matter. Clean is clean. You watch him wring out his hands slowly, the droplets catching the sunlight like tiny shimmering beads. You stand again and move on, carrying with you the cool clarity of the well, the freshness of herbs, and the quiet sense that medieval people understood something we often forget. Cleanliness is also a feeling. You walk deeper into the afternoon, the day unfolding in gentle, steady warmth around you. The afternoon light lengthens as you walk, softening into a warm, honey-colored glow that settles over the countryside like a comforting blanket. Shadows stretch lazily across the road. Even the birds seem to sing more slowly, as if respecting the drowsy rhythm of the day. You feel the warmth on your shoulders, the breeze on your face, and the faint lingering sense of herbs and well water on your skin. This is the kind of hour that begs for quiet reflection, or at least a comfortable place to sit. You find just such a place at the edge of a small hamlet, where several villagers have gathered near a gently bubbling communal cauldron set over a stone hearth. The cauldron's contents steam softly, releasing a soothing, almost sweet aroma. You step closer. A middle-aged woman stirs the pot and smiles at you. "Herb broth," she says, "for washing feet, or hands, or whatever life throws at you." Inside, the water floats sprigs of thyme, marigold petals, and a generous handful of akli, willow bark. Your historical fact of this section: willow bark contains salicin, an early form of what later becomes aspirin. Medieval people often used it in warm baths or broths to soothe swelling, soften skin, and ease minor aches. A young man sits on a low stool beside the cauldron, soaking his bare feet in a wooden tub filled with diluted broth. "Warms the bones," he sighs, leaning back as though levitating with comfort. Someone hands you a small ladle, encouraging you to pour a bit of the warm mixture over your hands. You do. The heat sinks into your skin, immediately soft, comforting, almost medicinal. You rub your palms together, letting the herbs release their faint oils. The scent drifts upward, earthy, floral, slightly sharp from the willow. You feel like your hands just exhaled. Nearby, a group of children are gathered around a wooden table covered with bowls of ground herbs, dried flowers, and oats. They're mixing everything together with a joyful messiness that suggests creativity, not precision. Every so often, one holds up a clump of their mixture proudly. "What are you making?" you ask. "Face powder," one girl announces. "For mama," another child adds. "And for goats. They smell bad." A goat bleats indignantly from 2 feet away. Your obscure tidbit of this section. In some medieval households, powdered blends of dried herbs, flowers, and ground grain were used not only as primitive cosmetics, but as personal deodorizing powders, soft, lightly scented, and far more pleasant than many harsher options of the era. A woman approaches the table, laughing softly. She pats a bit of the powder onto her cheeks, giving her skin a warm, pale glow. "Keeps the shine away," she says. "Makes you look less like you've been chasing pigs." A fair enough goal. Farther down the lane, a man sits peeling strips of bark from a fallen tree. Instead of using them for kindling, he crushes them into smaller chips and soaks them in a clay bowl. "Elm bark," he explains, holding up a slippery, mucilaginous piece. "Good for the skin. Slippery as an eel. Keeps things smooth." He rubs a bit on his arm. It leaves a glossy sheen, like armor, but nicer. A few villagers stand by a narrow stream, washing themselves with rushes soaked in warm water. Rushes are long, thin plants with soft, pliable stalks. One woman bends a bunch into a gentle curve and uses it like a flexible brush to sweep across her arms and shoulders. "Better than cloth," she says. "Doesn't scrape too hard. And it dries fast." You try a rush dipped in warm water from the cauldron. The texture is smooth, slightly firm, surprisingly soothing. It glides easily across your skin with a soft whisper. A man seated nearby uses a different method. He rubs a paste of crushed fennel seeds onto his hands. The scent is sweet and spicy, sharp like licorice. "Good for the smell," he says. "And for keeping insects away. Or attracting them. Hard to tell." A potter emerges from his workshop carrying a bucket of warm, thin, watery clay used for pottery. To your surprise, he dips his hands into it before washing them in the stream. "Makes the dirt slide off," he says, "and makes the skin feel cool." Indeed, The clay leaves a faint white film on his skin that he scrubs off easily in the water. The result is smooth, even-toned hands that look unlike those of a craftsman who works with fire and earth all day. Historians still debate whether potters use slip intentionally for washing, or whether it was a happy accident of their trade, he says, shaking droplets from his fingers. Either way, it works. The sun drifts lower, painting the hamlet in warm amber light. Villagers chat lazily as they clean, rinse, soak, and soften themselves. There's no rush, no pressure, just simple, shared care. You sit for a moment on a smooth stone, letting the warmth of the cauldron's rising steam brush your face. It feels like the world telling you to slow down, just a little. After a few breaths, you rise again. Your skin feels warm, faintly fragrant, softened by herbs and steam. You carry with you the comfort of willow, the sweetness of fennel, the coolness of slip, the laughter of children making powders, and the ease of a small community caring for itself in simple, human ways. The day still stretches ahead, quiet and inviting. You continue walking into the next gentle chapter of your medieval journey. The sunlight has shifted into a softer, more amber hue as you continue along the winding road, casting long, gentle shadows across the countryside. The air cools slightly, brushing your arms with a refreshing breeze that carries hints of crushed leaves, warm earth, and distant wood smoke. It's the kind of late afternoon that makes everything feel slower, calmer, like the world itself is winding down toward evening. Ahead, nestled against a hillside, you see a small group of huts arranged in a semicircle. Smoke curls from chimneys, goats wander lazily, and several villagers gather around a long wooden table set beneath a leaning oak tree. As you approach, you hear the familiar splash of water and the rustle of herbs, another improvised hygiene ritual in progress. An elderly woman stands at the head of the table, stirring a large wooden basin filled with warm water and crushed violet petals. The petals float on the surface like tiny purple boats, releasing a floral scent that drifts toward you in slow waves. Violet water, she explains, makes the skin soft, helps with redness. She scoops up a handful and lets it trickle through her fingers. It looks delicate, fragrant, almost luxurious, an unexpected indulgence tucked into the middle of a hard-working village. Your historical fact of this section: violet was occasionally used in medieval skincare, especially as a gentle cooling wash for the face. The petals were believed to soothe irritation and refresh tired skin. A young girl dips a cloth into the violet water and wipes her cheeks with exaggerated elegance. Like a queen, she says proudly, her version of self-care. Nearby, a group of men are rubbing their arms with crushed juniper berries. The berries leave behind a sharp, resinous scent, strong enough to make the air smell like the medieval version of a forest cologne. Juniper keeps the pests away, one man says, and makes you smell like you fought a tree and won. He crushes another berry between his fingers. The scent is strong, almost spicy. A little farther down the table, a pair of women work with freshly churned buttermilk, splashing it onto their arms and necks, rubbing it in with practiced motions. You can't help but raise an eyebrow. Yes, it smells like breakfast. One laughs, but it leaves the skin smooth. She lifts her arm, showing a pale, refreshed sheen. Indeed, the lactic acid in buttermilk would have worked as a mild cleanser, a medieval secret hidden in plain sight. Your obscure tidbit of the section: in some regions, buttermilk, or sour milk, was used as a gentle skin wash. It cleansed, softened, and brightened the skin long before chemical exfoliants existed. A man sitting near the woodpile dips a cloth into a bowl of pine resin mixed with warm water. When he rubs it across his hands, the resin leaves a faint sticky layer, then dries quickly, forming a smooth, protective coat. For the cracks in winter, he says, keeps the skin tight. He demonstrates by flexing his hands dramatically, though his dog appears unimpressed. Across from him, a woman grinds dried mint stems into a rough powder. She sprinkles some into a small ceramic bowl of water and stirs until the mixture becomes pale and cloudy. For the scalp, she explains, massaging the mixture into her hairline, takes away the heat and the itch, and maybe the bad thoughts too. A few villagers sit near a fire pit, tossing bundles of rosemary and bay into the flames. The herbs crackle, releasing clouds of fragrant smoke that drift through the clearing like invisible lace. Smoke cleansing, a man says, waving his arm through the scented air. Good for the spirit, good for the clothes, good for pretending you bathe today. You step toward the fire, letting the aromatic smoke brush your skin and clothing. It leaves behind a subtle warmth and a pleasant scent. 1 part forest, 1 part kitchen, 1 part ancient ceremonial mystery. Historians still debate whether smoke baths were mostly spiritual or mostly practical. The man adds thoughtfully, but either way, they work. Beyond the circle, a woman kneels beside a clay pot filled with warm barley tea, thin, pale, slightly sweet. She dips a cloth in and presses it to her face, inhaling deeply. Makes the skin calm, she murmurs, and tastes good afterward. She winks, sipping from the cloth. You try a bit on your fingers. It feels faintly silky, soothing like the warm breath of a quiet moment. The sun has dipped lower now, touching everything with amber and gold. Shadows deepen, voices soften. The small community continues its gentle rituals, washing, brushing, scenting, steaming, as if preparing not just for evening, but for rest. You stand in the middle of it all, feeling the cool breeze on your face, the faint scents of violet, juniper, pine, and rosemary drifting around you. Your skin feels clean in a layered way, washed not just by water, but by time, air, plants, and quietness. For a moment, you let the stillness settle into your bones. Medieval cleanliness may be strange, varied, and occasionally questionable, but it's also sincere, thoughtful, and deeply human. You take one more breath, warm and slow. Then you step away from the clearing, continuing deeper into the unfolding evening. Evening settles slowly over the land, softening the edges of everything it touches. The sky deepens into a warm gradient gold, melting into rose, rose into lavender, lavender into a quietening blue. The air cools in gentle degrees, brushing your skin with the soft chill that signals the day's long exhale. It's the hour when birds quiet down, when firewood crackles louder, and when people begin thinking of supper. And yes, one last round of medieval cleaning before darkness comes. You follow a narrow dirt lane lined with low stone walls. Sheep bleat lazily from a nearby pasture, wagging their tails as if giving you a casual approval rating. You nod back at them out of courtesy. Up ahead, a small farmhouse glows with the warm flicker of lamplight. Beside it, several villagers gather near a wooden bench, each engaged in their own final cleansing rituals of the day. A woman sits on a stool, carefully brushing her hair with a bone comb dipped in warm nettle tea. The tea drips slowly from the comb's teeth, soaking into her long hair. Nettle makes it strong, she explains, and keeps the shine. And the little bugs don't like it. She swishes her hair proudly. It gleams in the fading light. Your historical fact of this section. Nettle infusions were widely used for hair washing and scalp health in medieval Europe. Rich in vitamins and minerals, they reduced oiliness and strengthened hair long before modern shampoos. Next to her, an elderly man is rubbing crushed parsley onto his hands. The scent is surprisingly bright, clean, green, almost peppery. For the smell, he says. Parsley chases away the garlic. He winks. Not the wife, though. A few steps away, a young woman sits with a bucket of warm salt brine, soaking her feet with a blissful expression that suggests she has transcended the physical plane. Long day, she sighs. Salt takes the ache. Indeed, salt baths, primitive and uneven, were used to soothe tired muscles, clean wounds, and reduce swelling. Near her, a man kneels with a clay pot filled with boiled marigold petals. He dips a cloth into the golden liquid and dabs it onto his arms. For scratches, he says, and keeps the skin bright. The marigold water leaves a faint yellow sheen that catches the sunset like liquid sunlight. Your obscure tidbit of this section, marigold, calendula, was used extensively in medieval skincare for its soothing and mildly antiseptic properties. It was applied to scratches, sunburn, rashes, and even chapped skin. Beyond them, a group of children play a game where they toss puffs of dried moss at each other. When the moss sticks to sweaty skin, it absorbs moisture instantly. Nature's chaotic little powder puff. One girl grabs a handful of moss, smacks it against her brother's forehead, and shouts, "Clean." He shouts back, "No, and flops dramatically into the grass. You leave the moss wall behind. To your right, a woman sits beside a wooden bucket filled with sour ale, stirring it with a cloth. She wrings it out and presses the ale-soaked rag against her face. Sour ale tightens the skin, she explains, and keeps wrinkles away. Or so my mother said. She shrugs. Her face looked like a walnut, but maybe she didn't use enough. The scent is sharp, grainy, and unexpectedly refreshing. A tall man stands near the house, rubbing charcoal dust gently along his palms. He notices your gaze. It absorbs the smell, he says, and the grease. Don't worry. I won't touch anything important afterward. He claps his hands. A faint black cloud drifts politely away. Past him, another villager sits cross-legged with a pot of lukewarm milk mixed with honey. She dabs the mixture onto her face with a soft cloth, humming to herself. For softness, she says. Milk warms the skin. Honey keeps it smooth. Her face looks peaceful and faintly glowy in the slow-falling dusk. Near the edge of the farmhouse yard, a woman tends a small fire, tossing sprigs of hyssop into the flames. The smoke rises in elegant wisps, carrying a strong herbal aroma, clean, sacred, sharp. Hyssop smoke keeps the sickness away, she murmurs. Cleans the air. She wafts the smoke gently over her clothes and hair. The scent clings lightly to you as you pass. Ancient, medicinal, comforting. You pause for a moment, letting the warm fire crackle beside you. The scents around you blend into a quiet tapestry. Nettles, parsley, salt, marigold, moss, sour ale, milk and honey, hyssop smoke. Strange, familiar, soothing. A soft voice beside you says, historians still debate whether evening cleansing traditions were communal or simply habit. Some say they were rituals, some say chores. The speaker, an old man leaning on a cane, adds with a smile, I say, everyone just likes going to bed feeling a little cleaner than they woke up. You smile. It feels true. The sky deepens into twilight now, the first stars blinking awake overhead. The villagers finish their quiet rituals and drift toward their homes, carrying bowls, cloths, herbs, and laughter. You take a slow breath of cooling evening air. This medieval world may lack soap, but as the night approaches, you feel washed by water, by plants, by human ingenuity, and by the rhythm of a day lived gently. You continue walking into the deepening dusk. Night stretches its blue fabric slowly across the sky as you follow a gently curving lane toward the outskirts of the hamlet. The air cools with each passing minute, brushing against your skin with a crispness that feels both refreshing and quietly solemn. Firelight glows from distant windows, small pools of gold in the growing darkness. Crickets begin their long, steady chorus, the medieval lullaby of fields and hedgerows. Ahead, you spot a cluster of villagers gathered around a small stream illuminated by lanterns hanging from tree branches. Their warm glow flickers across the flowing water, turning it into a ribbon of shifting amber and shadow. It looks peaceful, intentional, a place where the day's last cleansing rituals unfold with the unhurried grace of dusk. A woman kneels at the water's edge, dipping a cloth into a bowl filled with warm goat's milk. She presses the cloth to her face, letting the milk soak into her skin. Milk wash keeps the skin soft, she says with a smile, and helps before bed, makes the face feel quiet. Your historical fact of this section. Milk, especially goat's milk, was commonly used as a gentle nighttime cleanser. The fats and lactic acid softened the skin, reduced roughness, and offered a sense of comfort in an era without lotions. Next to her, a man crouches with a handful of sandalwood-like shavings, the medieval European version, made from aromatic shrubs such as juniper or sweet gale. He rubs the wood shavings between his wet hands, releasing a warm, resinous scent that clings like a calming shadow. Keeps the mind settled, he murmurs, good before sleep. Further up the bank, a boy rinses his arms with herbal ash water, a mixture of ashes sifted through a cloth into clean water. The greyish mixture looks unassuming, but when he rubs it into his skin, the fine ash particles scrub away the dust of the day. Mother says it gets the grime out, he says. Feels like tiny rocks hugging me. Your obscure tidbit of this section. Some medieval communities used incredibly fine ash from burned herbs or soft woods as a bedtime cleansing powder or gentle scrub. It absorbed oil, reduced odor, and could even soothe irritated skin. A woman nearby bounces a sleepy toddler on her lap, wiping the child's hands with a soft cloth dipped in warm chamomile tea. The toddler yawns dramatically, opening a tiny mouth as wide as humanly possible. Chamomile makes the little ones calm, she says, and smells like bedtime. You inhale the drifting scent, sweet, floral, soft, and feel a quietness settle inside you. A few steps away, a man sits polishing his arms with a bit of soft beeswax, warmed, between his palms. He rubs it onto his elbows and knuckles, creating a thin, protective sheen. Under the lantern glow, his skin gleams like polished wood. Wax keeps the night wind from cracking the skin, he says, and keeps the cold away. To your left, two women prepare a small bowl filled with rosehip mash, crushed rosehip berries mixed with warm water. One of them pats it gently on her cheeks and neck. Rosehip keeps the face clear, she explains, and gives color. She gestures toward her friend, whose cheeks glow gently in the lantern light. Behind them, a young man stands rinsing his hair with rainwater, collected from a wooden barrel. The water pours over him in a steady, cool sheet. He shakes his head like a dog spraying droplets everywhere and laughs. Always feels cleaner than well water, he says. Sky water. Fresh from the clouds. Closer to the forest edge, another group gathers around a small clay pot filled with warm honey water. They dip their fingertips, rubbing the mixture gently onto dry patches of skin, then rinse in the stream. Good for cracks, one woman says. Good for winter. Good for everything. A man nearby fans smoke from a small bundle of smoldering sage over his clothes. The smoke rises like a ghostly ribbon, clinging to the fabric. Smoke keeps the night spirits away, he says. And the real smells too. Finally, at the far end of the stream, a woman sits with a bowl of softened clay, pale, smooth, mixed with rainwater. She applies a thin layer to her face, letting it dry in the lantern light until it becomes matte and calm-looking. Clay takes the day away, she whispers. Then the night can begin. You sit with them a while, letting the lantern glow flicker across the water, letting the chorus of crickets fill the quiet spaces. You smell milk, sage, chamomile, juniper, wax, smoke, clay. You feel the soft coolness of dusk settling around you, touching your cheeks the way a soft cloth does after washing. Someone murmurs behind you. Historians still debate whether nighttime cleansing was ritual, superstition, or simply the comfort of routine. But sitting here now, watching the villagers cleanse away the dust of the day in the dim glow of lanterns, you know the truth is simpler. People have always wanted to feel clean before sleep. The lanterns sway gently. The stream whispers. Shadows soften. You rise once more and continue walking into the deepening night, carrying with you the gentle hush of medieval evening hygiene. Night settles fully now, wrapping the world in its soft, cool darkness. The moon rises slow and steady over the treetops round, pale and gentle, casting a faint silver glow across the countryside. The stars pulse quietly overhead like distant embers. Everything feels slower, softer, quieter. The medieval night is calm, but not empty. It breathes, murmurs, and sighs in rhythms older than memory. You follow a narrow footpath that threads between hedgerows and low stone walls until it leads you toward a small, lantern-lit clearing. A few villagers gather here, winding down the day with the final rituals meant to carry them into sleep, rituals that are part hygiene, part comfort, part superstition, and part just something to do before the blankets call. A woman sits first along the path, rubbing her hands with warm olive oil mixed with a pinch of crushed herbs. The oil gleams on her skin, catching the moonlight. Olive oil keeps the hands soft, she says, working it into her knuckles. Helps with the night air. She takes another dab, rubbing it into her elbows. The scent is faintly grassy, clean in a quiet way. Your historical fact of this section: though expensive, oils including olive oil, walnut oil, and even rendered animal fats were sometimes used as emollients in medieval Europe. They softened skin, protected against cold, and acted as primitive moisturizers long before creams existed. Nearby, a young man dips a cloth into a bowl of warm salt and thyme water, wiping his arms and chest in slow circles. His movements are calm, almost meditative. Good for sweat, he explains, and for sleeping well. He closes his eyes briefly as the warmth spreads across his skin. Beside him, a child sits cross-legged, rubbing powdered lavender buds between her palms until they release their bright scent. She pats the fragrant dust onto her sleeves, smiling in satisfaction. "Smells like dreams," she says. Your obscure tidbit of this section. Dried lavender was sometimes crushed and used as a simple dry scrub or clothing freshener before sleep. The gentle scent was believed to calm the mind and ward off nightmares. A little farther along, a woman kneels with a small bowl of warmed apple cider vinegar diluted with water. She gently wipes her face, neck, and hands, letting the crisp scent rise around her. "Clears the skin," she murmurs, and wakes the spirit just enough to settle it. To your left, a tall man stands holding a handful of soft linden leaves, dipping them in warm water and brushing them lightly along his arms. "Linden makes the skin calm," he says, and keeps away the night chill. His eyes lift to the moon with the contentment of someone who has mastered the art of bedtime. Not far beyond him, an older couple sits side by side, tending a small clay pot filled with warming herbs steeped in water, rosemary, bay, sage, and a sliver of garlic. They dip their fingers, massaging the warm infusion across their joints. "For stiffness," the man says. "For quiet hands. For old bones." The woman corrects gently, smiling. A few villagers prepare for rest in more mysterious ways. One woman holds a bundle of thyme and hyssop, rubbing it lightly between her palms before tucking it beneath her linen collar. "Keeps the night breath clean," she says, exhaling slowly. A man sits cross-legged on a blanket, rubbing warm gravel along his arms and legs. The stones slide smoothly after heating in a nearby fire, providing gentle friction. "Feels like brushing away the day," he tells you. The warm stones leave faint trails of heat behind. Further into the clearing, a young girl dips her fingertips into a shallow bowl of moonlit spring water left out in the open all evening, believed to be purified by the sky. "It makes dreams lighter," she whispers. "Mama says so." She touches a drop to her forehead like a blessing. The lanterns flicker softly around the clearing, casting golden halos that shift with the breeze. The villagers move slowly, quietly, with the easy precision of people who know these rituals by heart, washing away dust, scenting their sleeves, warming their joints, cooling their cheeks, softening their hands, preparing their bodies and minds for rest. Historians still debate whether these bedtime practices were for hygiene, superstition, or comfort. Someone murmurs from the shadows. The voice is soft, reflective. But who can say? We all need something to let the day go. You stand for a moment in the lantern glow, letting the calm seep into your bones. Your skin carries faint traces of lavender, thyme, warm oil, cool night air, and moonlight, some combination of scents that feels deeply human, deeply ancient. You breathe slowly. The night around you deepens. The stars pulse gently. And you continue walking, following the quiet path into the final hours of your medieval dream. The night grows deeper as you walk, and the world slips into a softer hush. The moon hangs higher now, brighter, rounder, casting silvery ribbons across the fields like quiet pathways only night walkers know. The coolness in the air settles around your skin, mixing with the many faint scents you've gathered throughout the day. Herbs, smoke, flowers, warm water, clay. You smell like a medieval apothecary who fell asleep in a garden, and oddly, it feels peaceful. The path leads you to a small riverside clearing, where the water glimmers in the moonlight like a length of silk. Lanterns sway from low branches, illuminating a handful of villagers engaged in their final and perhaps most intimate nightly cleansing practices. A man kneels first, cupping cold river water in his hands and splashing it onto his face. The shock pulls a low gasp from him, but he smiles afterward, breathing deeply. "Keeps the dreams sharp," he says, "and the mind clean." Your historical fact of this section. Many medieval people rinsed their faces in cold water before sleep, believing it cleared the mind and helped the body release the heat of the day. It wasn't just hygiene, it was a ritual of resetting, Beside him, a mother sits with her daughter, dipping soft cloths into a bowl of warm valerian root tea. She pats the cloth gently along the girl's neck, arms, and forehead. The girl relaxes instantly, her shoulders sinking in a sleepy melt. Valerian soothes the nerves, the mother whispers, helps children rest, helps grown-ups too. She presses a cloth to her own brow, closing her eyes with a silent sigh. The scent drifts to you, earthy, slightly sweet, deeply calming, a bedtime herb older than memory. A little farther up the bank, an older woman sits rubbing a mixture of honey and warm water onto her hands and forearms. The lantern light catches the sheen, turning her skin golden. For softness, she says, and sweetness in the dreams. She laughs quietly, and it keeps the cracking away. Near her, a young boy dips his hands into soot-darkened water, stirring it until the soot dissolves. You raise an eyebrow. For cleansing magic, he explains earnestly. Mama says soot takes the day's bad pieces and hides them. His mother, sitting nearby, gives a tired nod. And it scrubs the hands clean, she adds. That too. You watch as he rubs the watery soot between his palms. It acts like a kind of charcoal cleanser, primitive but real. Your obscure tidbit. Finely sifted soot was sometimes mixed with water for cleansing, especially in poorer households. When properly strained, it acted as a primitive version of the charcoal scrubs used centuries later. To your right, a man sits beside the river, brushing his hair with a bundle of soft rushes dipped in lavender water. Each stroke releases a fragrant cloud that drifts across the clearing like a tiny dream. Lavender keeps nightmares away, he says, or at least makes them smell nicer. On a fallen log, two women kneel with a bowl of warm broth made from boiled fennel seeds. They dab the liquid onto their faces using small cloths, murmuring softly to each other. Keeps the skin calm, one says, and keeps the mood kind, the other agrees. The fennel broth leaves a faint herbal sheen, catching the lantern light. Just beyond them, a man warms his hands over a small fire, then dips them into a bowl of cool rose water. The contrast makes him sigh. Heat to open, he says. Cool to close. He presses his hands to his face, warmth first, then coolness. Perfect way to end the day. A pair of older villagers sit together, gently rubbing soft goose feathers along their arms and cheeks. The feathers glide smoothly, whisper light. For the nerves, one says. For the heart, the other adds. They smile the way only long companions can. A little farther downstream, a woman fills a ladle with moonlit water, river water scooped at the reflection of the twined moon, and pours a thin stream along her arms. For purity, she whispers. Moon water keeps the spirit calm. The lanterns flicker softly. The river murmurs. A cool breeze ripples across the clearing, stirring the scents of lavender, fennel, valerian, rosewater, and the faint mineral hush of night-cooled river stones. One of the elders near the fire looks up as you pass and says quietly, historians still debate whether these nightly rituals were superstition, necessity, or comfort. He smiles gently, but I think people have always wanted to wash the day off themselves before sleep. You cannot carry the world into the night. You sit for a moment by the riverbank, letting the cool air kiss your cheeks, the lantern light warm your hands, the distant hum of crickets settle around you. The medieval night embraces you cool, fragrant, and honest. When you rise again, your mind feels clearer, your senses softened, your spirit quiet. You walk deeper into the moonlit path, nearing the end of your medieval day. The moon hangs high now, steady and luminous, watching quietly over the medieval world as it settles into deep night. The path beneath your feet narrows into a soft ribbon of trampled grass, leading you toward a distant hillside, where a faint glow flickers, warm, steady, inviting. The air is cool and carries the sense of all the small rituals you've passed through today. Herbs, water, clay, smoke, flowers, and the soft mineral hush of night itself. You approach a small stone cottage, tucked gently into the slope of the hill. A tiny lantern glows in its window like a sleepy heartbeat. Outside, a few villagers sit on low stools, finishing the last moments of their nighttime routines. A woman dips a cloth into warm peppermint water, wiping her arms and face with slow circular motions. For clear breathing, she says softly. Good for sleep. Next to her, An old man gently brushes his hair with a comb soaked in elderflower tea. The scent is faint and sweet old-world quietude. Your final historical fact: elderflower was widely used in late-evening skin washes to soothe swelling and cool the face after a long day's work. At the cottage's doorway, a mother smooths a little beeswax balm onto her child's cheeks, protecting them from the crisp night air before they retreat indoors. The child is already half asleep, blinking slowly, head heavy with dreams. Your last obscure tidbit: some medieval families believed that a touch of fragrant wax or fat on the cheeks kept wandering night spirits and cold draughts from disturbing sleep. Inside the cottage, you glimpse straw beds neatly arranged, blankets waiting, embers glowing in the hearth. A villager nods at you with a gentle smile, an unspoken welcome into their quiet, end-of-day peace. The night has grown soft around you. Your footsteps slow. The world feels ready for rest. The lantern light fades behind you as you walk just a little farther, settling into the deepest quiet you've felt all day. The world has softened into a cradle of shadows and moonlight, every sound lowered to a hush. The crickets hum with slow patience, and the breeze drifts lazily over the grass, brushing your clothes like a gentle hand smoothing wrinkles from a sleeve. You breathe in, feeling the faint trace of lavender still clinging to your sleeves, the cool memory of river water on your skin, the echo of warm herbal steam that has followed you through the day. Everything that was loud or busy hours ago has softened into something easy, slow, and kind. Your body feels heavier now, in the comforting way that invites rest. Your shoulders loosen without effort. Your breath settles into an even rhythm, like waves drifting onto a quiet shore. Each inhale feels cooler, each exhale warmer. The night around you seems to breathe with you, steady and calm. You find a soft patch of grass beneath an oak tree, its branches arcing overhead like a natural canopy. You sit, then slowly lie back, feeling the earth supportive beneath you. The stars overhead shimmer faintly, not demanding attention, just existing, quietly, endlessly, like a lullaby made of light. The medieval world around you has gone fully still. No more footsteps, no more chatter, just the gentle murmur of distant water, the faint warmth of memory on your skin, and the feeling of being clean, not in a perfect or modern way, but in a peaceful, human way. A way that says the day is done, and you've walked through it fully. You let your eyes soften, then close, and the night carries you slowly toward rest.